Welcome to this episode of Conversations with UX Copenhagen. The momentary brain freeze here. I'm sorry about that. We're here today talking to Mathias Louis, I'm sorry, from the company, the Danish digital design agency called 1508. And we are in a very idyllic place in Copenhagen with houseboats and canals, and it's just beautiful. I'll send you a picture when I send out the email after this. Anyway, we're super excited to be here, and we have been looking very much forward to speaking with Mathias. He's kind of been thrown under the bus. We're sorry about that, because we had a conversation with, I guess, one of the partners of 1508, and Mathias didn't really know that he was going to be speaking today, so he's been like, well, what's this all about? But it's because Mathias will be speaking at the conference, so this is your super early sneak preview of a new speaker announcement. So Mathias, why don't you tell us a little, oh, first of all, I want to say, by the way, anybody here listening agrees to the code of conduct for UX Copenhagen. It's on our website, and it just basically says that UX Copenhagen is always going to be a safe space for anybody to speak. So we have room of diverse voices, and there will be no discrimination or harassment, just so that that's in place. Mathias, welcome, and please tell us a little bit about yourself now, what you do at 1508, and then after that, I'm going to ask you about your talk.
Thank you, and good to have you here at 1508, and thank you for having me on the call and eventually on the conference as well. Yeah, just briefly about myself. My name is Mathias, and I work here at 1508 as the Business Development Director. So I've been doing that for about a year, and we are in a pretty interesting place. We've recently been acquired by a large Swedish company that is traded on the Swedish stock market. It's called Knowit, and they're a big IT consultancy. They have offices all over the Nordics here in Scandinavia, and we are in an interesting crossroads, like I said, because we have recently been stumbled upon this topic of degrowth and post-growth, which is also the topic of today and the talk that I'll be giving on the conference. So I'm going to talk a lot more about that today, I reckon, but that's something that we are very interested in and keen on learning more about. So that's also why we wanted to participate in this setup and the conference.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is such an important topic, and the more we kind of delve into it, and the more our speakers are coming together, and the topics they're bringing to the table, it's going to be so important. Such a good talk. So, yeah, really exciting.
And how come you guys are interested in this area?
Yeah, I think so. We are I'd say, classic digital design agency. We have the typical competences in the house that you would know from an agency that delivers websites, apps, design it, and develop it, and so forth. So I don't think that there is necessarily anything particularly degrowthy or post-growthy about 1508, but I think that's exactly the point as to why it's important to us. It should be important to everyone and anyone. So I think it's a matter of shared interest in the topic that we have cultivated. I'd say somewhat gently. We have been talking about it, and speaking of having a safe place, we have been sharing the ideas and the notions, and seeing how that kind of caught along with people, or if they found it interesting or found any energy in it. And I think it was quite quickly something that showed to have a rather broad interest amongst the people that work here. And maybe I should say that we are about 40 people here in this office of 1508 in Copenhagen. We also have an office in Aarhus, and of course in the wider Knowit company, I think there's 3,000 to 4,000 people. So it's a rather big organization of almost 100 autonomous entities that operate independently, but of course collaborate a lot. So so yeah, it's something that has kind of grown as a little seed that have been planted and then nurtured, and now we're in a place where we are gonna invest more time and resources into the topic during 2024. And also it's luckily not only us here in Copenhagen, but also our colleagues in Aarhus and in Node Experience in Denmark that are also gonna be able to chip in and learn and explore this topic. I can share a little bit more about that as we get along.
Okay. And what is your background?
So after leaving primary school, I've been in the world of business. I've been in a business college after primary school, and then I have been in a business university or business school in Aarhus for 5 years, doing a master's in business administration and economics, specialized in IT, in developing coding, but also doing a lot of what I think later came in handy here, joining an agency, doing a lot of like object-oriented design and analysis. But back then I didn't at all think about it as UX or design or anything like that. When I graduated, I joined a management consultancy, a part of Rampe, which is actually a engineering consultancy with a management consultancy branch. Worked with digital strategy and a lot of innovation strategies, especially with Rampe, the Rampe group that had a big innovation program. But I grew tired of the main output of management consultants' work, which is a lot of PowerPoints and analyses and documents, and I didn't think or feel that I was close enough to actually making any difference for the clients that I was working for. I was inviting them to make a difference, but actually executing on it wasn't part of it. So stumbled upon 1508 and found some good people and now friends in here. And yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up here. And what I do apart from business development aspect is what would classically be talked about as project management and strategic advisory, and of course a lot of sales and all the things that we need here to run the place. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you said you've been here about 4 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Cool. Oh, do you know, I just announced yesterday that we have a workshop coming up at the conference this year called Object-Oriented UX.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of that before, so that's going to be really interesting. Yeah. So yeah, okay, so let's talk about your talk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the topic in general, degrowth, is I personally stumbled upon it in a book by Douglas Rushkoff. It's called Survival of the Richest. Uh-huh. And it's kind of I guess a provocative book. The way I understand or remember is that he had a lot of rich and influential friends that he had helped a lot, and then kind of, I think, turned his back on them and began to share like what are all their crazy escape fantasies. And now that they've grown rich from extracting a lot of wealth and accumulating a lot of wealth, now they want to build spaceships and go to Mars or build bunkers or buy islands and all these things. And that's kind of, you know, a very dystopic but also very real thing that is going on right now. And out of this, and in his book, he also talked about what would the world look like if it was not like this. And at one point he touched on the climate crisis, and of course then revealed that degrowth in his eyes was the only like surefire way to reduce our energy and material consumption. Mm-hmm. So that was when I first met this topic and then started reading into it a lot, and has been doing so for more than a year now, I think. So it's a pretty new topic to me, and of course a pretty new topic to this place. But in general, degrowth is basically built on the premise that we are right now not adhering to the planetary boundaries or the levels of social well-being that are fair and reasonable to expect from any human being across the globe. And I think the head on the nail is that we need to reduce our current consumption of energy and materials to get back into balance with the planetary boundaries. And while we do that, we need to do it in a just and equitable way to ensure that we also create a socially just livelihood for everyone. And I think that's the three kind of legs that degrowth stands on. It's the sustainability aspect. It's the thing about creating an equitable planet, but also making it a place where everyone is able to have a social level of social well-being that is fair. And it comes down to the fact that the largest parts of the energy and material consumption globally happens in global north, while the global south is, of course, as we all know, the poorest parts of the planet, and also the part that experience the consequences of the overshoot that we live and breathe in the north. They experience the consequences first and also the most severely. So that's a pretty, once you realize that, and I hope that most people have by now, that it's a big motivation for changing things. So I think that's maybe one way to try and encapsulate what the degrowth is in and of itself. To me, it's a very important thing that I don't view the topic, or at least I don't practice the topic as a political topic. You can do that, and it is very political if you take that point of view, but I try to digest all the material and then convert it into something we can use in practice as an organization that is very much functioning in a classical capitalistic company structure.
Yeah, so that's my exact point of this whole conference, is that, you know, more and more of us are being aware that we're, you know, deplenishing the earth and there are hardly any resources left. But still, how are you going to convince people in capitalist countries, or, you know, how are you going to tell a billionaire to pay more taxes or be more planet, you know, conscious, or how are we going to convince these people, do you think?
I think that is especially the place where it becomes political. So back to what I said before, that's not the thing I'm most concerned about personally, because I think, I mean, the power of the politicians, there is no global democracy or no global politicians. There are a lot of states and governments and so forth, but to have them all collaborate on finding the answers to this is, I don't think it's an easy task, and I don't think that it necessarily will happen. So if I have an answer to that, I think it's more about asking how can we influence the next generation of founders and want to be Elon Musk's or Jeff Bezos, to have other people to look up to, or maybe not people, but cooperatives or whatever, that has chosen another way, which is not focused on profit maximizing and exiting the company and getting rich, basically.
How do we influence the next generation of startups? I love that. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but then again, I was just reading about the tipping point. We've got somebody else that's going to talk about the tipping point, the social tipping point, which is where, so a lot of people are always like, but I'm just one voice. How can my little voice make a change? And I always say, well, there's Greta Thunberg. She's one, you know, 16-year-old that started. But no, the point of the tipping point is that if you have 25% of people's support, that's the tipping point, and then it goes very fast from 25 to 75 and further up. So that's a really interesting thing. So if you're feeling that, you know, I'm just one little voice and my voice is not going to make a difference, but then if you get 24 other people, then you're kind of on the way to making change.
Yeah, it's very interesting that the minority can actually flip the tables on that turning point. So that's definitely also something that we look to as a part of motivation. And I think basically what it says is that you should definitely speak up, right?
Yeah.
So we've also been thinking a lot about what does to speak up, like who are you? You have so different places you could speak up. You can speak up as an owner of a company. You can rearrange the ownership structure, make it an employee-owned company. Of course, you would have to give up your ownership yourself. So I don't think we see that too often, or often enough. You're also a worker in a company. So that's kind of the hat that we're wearing when we are trying to speak up about this and make a change. You're also a consumer, where you can of course eat less meat and so forth, and have some kind of impact. You're a citizen, you can vote and pay your tax, and of course you are a civilian. And I think the civilian part is something that is getting a lot of attention in the literature, at least, about, and something that we don't do a lot of in Denmark, but it is the whole thing about building communities around basic services that we need. And I think the reason is that the Danish state is providing a lot of these basic services. But in the United States or in the UK, there's a big growth in the number of cooperative companies or organizations that work with various things, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, back to your point, we hope that we can move the needle, focusing on being employees of a company and seeing if we can spread this message and maybe break down some barriers, maybe start doing things differently and so forth. And so far we have succeeded with actually setting aside a specified number of hours throughout 2024 that goes into exploring and learning new ways of conducting business, or helping other businesses that are actually doing stuff that ties into an overall question of contributing to this systemic shift that we need towards a post-growth and well-being economy. So that's something that we have already succeeded with. I mean, it's only the license to do something, but at least it's a license to do something.
That's excellent. And I mean, if there's 4,000 people in this company, that's, you know, it's a big scale. That's a lot of people.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So can you tell me what is the difference between degrowth and post-growth?
Yeah, so degrowth is typically seen as a transitional period where, generally speaking, in the global north, if we are to reduce our material consumption and energy consumption, we will most likely also see a reduction in the economy, the size of the economy. But degrowth is not necessarily focusing on reducing the GDP of any nation, but it will most likely be the consequence of not producing a lot of, let's say, various products or services that we don't need. If we scale down on them, the economy will of course also scale down. So that's because we overshoot very, like in March or something in Denmark and a lot of other countries in the global north, we need to downscale our material footprint and energy consumption. So that's the degrowth part. And in that transitional period, of course, the global south would most likely see the need to actually grow still, because they're not meeting fair living standards, and to do so they need to grow also economically. So that's a movement, and when this movement, if this movement ever ends at its destination, that is where we talk about the post-growth society or paradigm or economy. And when we talk about it here at 1508, we talk about it as post-growth and well-being economy, because we would like to also shine a light on the well-being aspect of things.
Yeah, we're also going to have a talk about that, mental health and well-being and so on. So you're saying that the GDP may decrease, but so my point is also that, you know, we can still have degrowth, but that it doesn't have to affect a company's bottom line. Do you agree with that?
That we can still have degrowth and it won't affect the bottom line of the company?
So, I mean, you can still earn money and you can still,
Sure.
you know, profit.
Yeah, so that's the thing. What is it that if you are to shine a light on the company structure and say what is it that actually needs to decrease in growth? I think, to me personally, the thing that has spun growth out of control is that most companies are owned by someone who has some kind of expectation to get a return on the investment that they've made, which is very natural and the way that things work right now. So I think it's not necessarily bad for a company to grow, but it shouldn't grow indefinitely or in perpetuity. It needs to at some point balance out when it meets some kind of break even or what is also sometimes referred to as a carrying capacity. And I think that's the biggest change here. So if you were, let's say we're a design agency of 40 people like us, and we were cooperatively structured, and we had put a profit cap in so that we don't have this endless profit maximization focus, then yes, we would basically grow and maybe also sometimes degrow in terms of the demand in the market, which is also what we do today. But today we just have a margin of profits that we also need to balance into this whole thing, because shareholders eventually needs their dividends. So I think it's mostly on the part of what is paid as dividends or distributed as profits to the owners. That is the place where if you change this, then you don't have the let's call it the motivation to actually sometimes set aside planetary boundaries and social well-being.
I mean, isn't that the mindset of a lot of startups, especially in tech, that, you know, we're going to start this so that we can sell, and so that, yeah, at one point we can sell and earn a lot of money?
I think so, but I won't generalize.
No.
But I think that it is, of course, something we've seen a lot, and that is kind of the market of companies or startups, that they are also a commodity. Everything is a commodity. Anything can be bought. Everything has a price. So I think it's not the most charming aspect of running a company, I think, but it's definitely something that some people to kind of succeed with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So at this point, I would have brought in the audience and asked them ask questions, but nobody showed up, so we hopped over on Teams instead of. Yeah, that doesn't matter. But anyway, so yeah, no, I'm kind of.
Yeah, I was thinking the trend of, you said yourself you bought up by this other company, so that's a huge company, and that's a lot of, not only you, that's a lot of companies that's well, it's capital funds come in and take over, and as the nature of a capital fund is growth, right?
Yeah.
So the horizon of that might look a bit dark, because I think it's been a trend for a long time now.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So
how do you see that?
yeah, we were not acquired by a capital fund, even though that could, of course, have, or probably someone would have. Some companies are, of course, bought by capital funds, and they are, of course, very much tied up in terms of performing, and there are a lot of goals in terms of realizing this investments that they have made. In our case, it's not the way we experience it, and we are feeling much more like we are left to run the business that we were already running, and making it as profitable as possible. And I think being in a transitional period, it's very easy for someone to point to you and say, well, you are still part of the system, so how can you talk into this topic or speak into this topic? And I think probably no one will be able to talk about degrowth or post-growth without being a part of the dominant economic system. So I think that's fine, and that's the way it should be. What matters the most is that you are trying to change things in any way possible. We're also talking a lot about doing that in a way that doesn't jeopardize or bet the house on something. So it's definitely a controlled learning effort that we're trying to do here, to see if there is anything beyond growth that we could actually learn already now, still being a part of a growth dependent system, and then basically preparing ourselves for the future, because as the mantra goes, either you degrow by design, or you degrow by disaster. And I think that's the shadow part of things here, is that when you dive into the topic of how is the planet actually doing, and what's actually going on, that's also a great motivator, I think, or at least it should be for anyone, that we simply need to do something. And some people think that the window we have to act is only until 2030, and then it's too late to actually change anything meaningful.
That is so scary. That is so scary. I mean, the reason for the topic, degrowth and consumerism, is actually because our closing keynote from last year, he said, you know, there is no planet B. And he had some numbers. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps. He says that if we continue farming the planet the way we're doing it right now, we have 60 years left, and then nothing is left. Yeah. I mean, that is so scary.
Yeah.
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 So we have to, I mean, and there's so many people who don't believe in climate change, and yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of scary sometimes, I think.
Yeah. I was thinking just in the day-to-day way of changing your household. I was thinking of my 10-year-old daughter talking about the trash. You have to put plastic in one bag and all that. And then at the same time, we had a world map by our dining table, and we're looking at our tiny country beside the whole world, and talking about the how much Denmark is actually doing. I mean, Denmark is actually doing maybe not to degrowth right now, but to other environmental issues, and how it could look like a drop in the sea, in the ocean, when you're looking at the world map, right? So how can we, I think that maybe it's back to how can we as an individual or as a small country change that?
Yeah, I think we're in Denmark, we're very good at showcasing ourselves as green pioneers and so forth, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I think I read recently that Denmark is the most, or the biggest producer of oil in the EU. Of course, because Norway is not a part of the EU, or I don't actually know how Denmark and Norway compare. But so I think, and we do have still keeping the door open to expand more, searches for oil and gas, and we also have a big issues with our oceans around Denmark in terms of lack of oxygen, and we have an industrial agricultural system that is not as romantic as I think the saying goes, or as I think Danes think. So, but touching upon these things again, it becomes easily very political, and we're definitely not doing anything in terms of degrowth politically, still aiming to grow GDP. So many things that you could get lost in terms of all these things. So what I try to do personally is that just focusing on these different arenas that I can actually act in as a civilian. I can also go and throw tomato sauce at a Picasso painting, or I can glue myself to some place. I think a lot of people are doing this, and these people come from any places in society. So activism comes in many shapes and forms. I think right now what I'm at least personally trying to do is to try and act within the realm of having a job and actually being able to build upon the people that try and get the message across the media or in front of the politicians. We have a chance to take this into the boardrooms, take it to the clients, take it to the products that we design, and all these things. So I think I don't know how valuable it is in terms of comparing to the other arenas, but at least it's something worth doing. And then it doesn't really matter whether Denmark is a small or a big country, but changing the culture and the way to approach things is just as important, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny, I told my sister about the subject for this year, and she's like, yeah, of course that's your subject. And she's like, you know, every time somebody has the water running in her house, she's like, she hears my voice, turn off the water. I know many people in my immediate family and friends, they hear the same thing. So, you know, you do what you can, right? You recycle. I mean, of course, we don't know what happens to the plastic that we recycle. It could be sent to Sri Lanka, or you know.
Most likely is.
But you know, we're doing our best, trying. So yeah, I mean, yeah, but you never know. I mean, maybe at this conference, you know, somebody will stop that. I don't know. You know, you never know what happens. So at least we're speaking up.
Exactly.
I think that's one of the interesting things is that this has been brought up as an issue since the 70s, and I think even before this, and nothing has actually happened. And I think I haven't been on the planet for that long, but reading into this, I can easily get embarrassed about not realizing these things before.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is with a dominant system and a way of thinking that is just widespread as this is. It's hard to break free from it, and we even feel that it's some kind of natural law that we are to work in this way, and that this economic system somehow just arise out of the ashes of some worse situation or something, and that's not at all the case. I can recommend reading some of Jason Hickel's work on this and the way that he describes the history of capitalism and how it came about, because that is not at all a romantic story, and it's much more a story of breaking a system that was actually in balance with the world and the people and nature, breaking that system to actually enclose every little piece of land and then capitalize off of it.
Yeah.
And that was a bloody and a messy period 500 years ago, and it also it started here in Europe, but it grew to be the whole colonization and imperialistic approach to dominating the entire world came out of this shift. So it's definitely not a rosy thing when you dive into the history of this economic system.
But the same goes for the theme we had for last year, which is invisibility, and that was based on Caroline Prieto-Perez's book about the gender data gap.
Yes.
And excellent read, by the way. And that's how it actually basically started at the same time as agriculture, and people, men started saying, this is my land. At the same time, women were kind of forced into being at home, and so that's like the whole way that patriarchy and everything started, which is also incredible and incredibly hard to break free from, again, because it's so ingrained in everybody. So, I was driving through Sweden last winter, and there's a pedestrian crossing sign, and it was like, you could tell that it was a woman. She was wearing a dress. And I mean, that was just such a, 10 points for Sweden, because it's so ingrained in us that a pedestrian is just a man walking, so it's very ingrained, but same way as I guess capitalism is ingrained in us.
Yeah.
Or colonialism, I guess.
Yeah. Land grabbing and all these things are still happening.
Oh yeah.
And then I think now it's just justified because it's happening in a more civilized way.
Civilized.
Through capital, and definitely it's not civilized, but it's viewed as being this. And I think if turning a little bit to what I'll be talking about on the talk, I think it would be nice to, of course, dive a little bit into some of the basics of what this is, like we just talked a little bit about today. But also I was hoping to share some of the things that we're doing here more practically, and the participants being, I reckon, the designers of maybe different traits, but most likely also UX. I think it would be of interest to hear, like, what are the things we're actually trying to do, and how far have we gotten with those things. So I hope to be able to share, like, how do we adapt to this new economic system or paradigm without actually being a part of it yet, because we are very much a part of the old paradigm also come March 28. And then I'm also trying to brew up some steps towards how to take up the conversation in whatever organization you're part of, based on also how we did it here. So that's not at all done right now, but it hopefully will be at that point, so I can share a little bit more about that. So basically, some of the basics of degrowth, talking about the journey that we are on, and then maybe also inviting anyone who is interested to take up the journey themselves with the little tips and tricks from what we did or are doing.
Great. Sounds wonderful. Yeah, that's going to be great. That's really great. And 1508 is going to be hosting a workshop on low carbon web with practical details about what you can do in your own companies, right? Do you have a little bit more about the workshop? I know you're not hosting it. Do you know a little bit more?
Yeah, I can I can say what I hope and think that they will be doing, the people that will be facilitating it.
Friday the 22nd, so the day after the conference.
Yeah. So these good people are working on trying to make it tangible how the choices that you make in terms of designing a website influence the carbon footprint. And it comes down to the bytes that you are consuming as you load the page, and the choices that you have made in the user interface in terms of using video or different fonts or images or illustrations, or where you host things, or if there are a lot of animations and all these things, basically setting a constraint for yourself, a budget in terms of how much you want to be, how much data you want to be using, and then having this frame, you can distribute what kind of media would you like to use the most on the website. This is also something that they are brewing up and testing and trying out. So I'll be curious to see where they are also in a month and a half, or how much time there is. So
about 65 days, I think.
Yeah. So maybe I hope I didn't see this for things too much, but I think that's the last things that I saw and heard.
That's going to be great. I mean, we've been looking at it too. We found out that WordPress is actually one of the worst website builders you can use, which is what we use. So. Well, I mean, first step is becoming aware of it, right? And then fixing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And looking so much forward to getting hands-on experience and hands-on tricks to go home and implement.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. That's gonna be great. Yeah. So anything else that you're reading right now? You've mentioned a couple books that I will send out in the email afterwards. But.
I've actually turned to some fiction to have a little bit of a break from all the heavy topics. But it's also in the same topic, I'd say, still. But I got aware of it from a podcast called The Great Simplification by Nate Higgins, and he talked about a book that he's also teaching, I think, college students, and there's a book that is mandatory for them to read that kind of brings them maybe the correct mindset, or at least another mindset into the classes that he's doing. And it's a book by Daniel Quinn called Ishmael, and it's I think I don't overshare if I say that it's a young man finds a teacher that he wants to find a teacher, and he finds a teacher, and it's a gorilla that he then has a long conversation with and a long journey. And I think I'm 3/4 of the way through the book, and it's very, very interesting, and it really dives into the culture and the mythologies that we're living by that basically govern the way we act, and also the way that we reinforce, for example, an economic system, or the way that we colonize the world. So that's very mind-boggling, and it's a really nicely written book. It's very very enjoy. I enjoy to read it a lot. Yeah.
Nice. And thanks for that. That's great. Yeah, I was also thinking about how you were talking about the planet before, and I've recommended this one before, but there's also a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, I think it's called, by. I'll put it in the email, but that's also a really, really good book about how this woman, indigenous woman in America, goes back to her roots, and she's got like this piece of land, and she starts cleaning out the swamp that was, and bringing back the salamanders, and it's just it's like a very mellow, and I heard it as a audiobook, and her voice is just very calm and soothing. It's really nice. Yeah.
I think we can learn a lot from indigenous people.
Yes.
Speaking of things that you are, or that I have been embarrassed to be very late to the party, and realizing is, for example, that indigenous people are actually embracing a mindset that has been long lost in the Western world, and that is the way that they connect to nature, not by seeing themselves as something different from nature, but as a part of nature. I think, and a lot of people think, and I only have it from others, that the opposite mindset, this dualistic, or the dualism that we are preaching and doing in everything that we do, that is kind of the gateway drug to actually taking the economic system to where it is today, or capitalism to where it is today. That was to play, was that we changed our mindset from feeling that we were a part of nature to something feeling that we could dominate and were above nature. That was a necessary little trick to install in people's heads for us to actually exploit and extract and treat the planet as we do today. Wow. So that's why I think the whole thing about indigenous people is something that I really need to dive into personally and understand better.
We're going to have a very interesting talk at the conference with a woman from the northeastern part of India, where she actually goes back to her cultural roots and the way they farm. So that's going to be really interesting, and how she brings that into UX today. So, yeah, good stuff. And we've also got, hopefully, we've got Sasha. I think she is from, I can't remember. I'm sorry, but there's, I think she's from Kenya. No, I'm sorry. She's from, shoot, I forgot. Anyway, I'm sorry. She's going to be talking about agri-tech and what they use in Africa, in her country in Africa. So it's going to be really cool. I'm so embarrassed that I can't remember where she's from right now, but I haven't signed her up yet completely, so that's why. Yeah. So that's going to be really interesting too. So these are going to be like very diverse perspectives on degrowth and consumerism. And I'm really looking forward to speaking to these people from India and Africa, because we're so much in this little bubble, especially in the Nordics, I think. I mean, I'd say, yeah, the US and the Nordics maybe have kind of the same bubble, but maybe not. Yeah.
Definitely bubbles.
Bubbles for sure.
Yeah.
That need to be burst.
Yeah.
Oh, this is really interesting. That's great. Yeah. So yeah, but so the whole mindset about us being different than the dualism, is that also from Jason Hickel, or?
Yeah. Also from him, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that a lot of people that write about this or think or dive into degrowth and post-growth. This is one of the fundamental things that drive this behavior that we are exhibiting right now. And I think that it's the whole foundation of this civilization that we have right now. And that's also basically from the book of Daniel Quinn that I mentioned before. It's also something that they talk a lot about, the gorilla and the guy. And I think it becomes very philosophical even. So that's very interesting. I think it's nice to take some other perspectives on things. And this resonates very well with me, at least.
That's great. It's good to hear. Yeah. I knew you were a good fit for the conference. Yeah. So it's actually 5 to 4. So I know that we started a little bit late, but do you have any closing remarks or anything like this? You know the title of this, I mean, your quote. I always have a quote for somebody from, so I usually send out an email after this conversation and say that now it's been published to our YouTube channel on UX Copenhagen on YouTube. And then there's a quote, and yours is, of course, degrowth by design or degrowth by disaster.
Yeah, that's
pretty amazing.
I'd be happy to quote it for that, but it's definitely not my quote.
No.
It's a saying that goes back a while, I think. Yeah, but closing remarks. No, I think it's now we have tried to bring up the topic here in this little house here, and also tried to take it further in the wider family. I've also been reaching out to a lot of people that may or may not have this on the radar yet, and I think it's not something that people reject right away, especially if it is described in a way that is not understood as now we're going back to the caves, because that's definitely not what is happening. It's more of getting down on the ground or something, and not be flying around or over consuming all the time. I guess that's also the topic, or part of the topic of the conference in terms of consumerism. So yeah, I think it's not that dangerous to bring this topic up. That's one thing that I've learned, but one should be prepared to also explain then what it is, why it isn't dangerous, and how we can actually do it. And it doesn't mean that you need to shut your business down. It just means you need to be doing a little bit less and also finding out that that no one will be profiting from it, and can that work, and so forth. So difficult conversations, but there's a lot of energy in it from basically anyone that I've talked to.
Yeah.
So
or on the other hand, also, I mean, you can profit. You know, it's like when we look at who's the perfect, focus group, and instead of just producing for the masses, then find your exact customer for the exact amount of produce that you need, or products. So yeah.
So breaking even.
Yeah. I read a quote the other day. It says, "If it can't be reduced, reused, repaired, rebuilt, refurbished, refinished, resold, recycled, or composted, then it should be restricted, redesigned, or removed from production." I thought that was, and it says Pete Seeger.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought that was,
Good one.
yeah, that kind of sums up the whole thing, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. Okay, well, we hope that everybody tunes into this, and anybody watching, of course, tickets for UX Copenhagen on March 20th and 21st are available on our website. We'd love to see you there. I'd love to have you join the conversation. And yeah, what else? We have plenty of both videos and other conversations with other speakers on our YouTube channel, YouTube/UX Copenhagen. And what else can we say? Sign up for the workshop with 1508.
Definitely.
Yeah,
yes.
We'll be posting more about that, I'm sure both on 1508's website and ours. So yeah, hope to see you there, and join us next time. Thanks a lot for your time, Mathias.
Thank you.
It was awesome. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Just to cover what we had was strong. Find another one.